Welcome all to part 2 of an interview we had with Sam Harris. He generously gave us about 3 hours of his time, so we decided it was wise to divide the interview into 2 self-contained parts, both of which have a lot of integrity and wisdom in and of themselves. However, if you want to view part 1 first, the link will be in the description of this video. So, in introduction, Sam Harris is a neuroscientist, philosopher, author, and podcaster whose work explores the intersection of science, morality, religion, and contemplative practice. He holds a degree in philosophy from Stanford University and a Ph.D. in neuroscience from UCLA. He's the author of several New York Times bestsellers, including The End of Faith, The Moral Landscape, Free Will, Lying, and Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. Sam hosts the Making Sense podcast and is the creator of the Waking Up app, which offers a secular and scientific approach to meditation and the good life. With more than 3 decades of meditative practice, including a cumulative 2 years on silent retreat, he has studied under such teachers as Sayadaw U Pandita, Punjaji, Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, and with his friend Joseph Goldstein. And we were so grateful to have a chance to speak with him. We hope you enjoy it too.
Actually just going a bit more deeply into that biography, both for our secular and our Buddhist listeners, could you just trace a bit more of those biographical details that leads you into this seemingly paradoxical situation of seeing religion as, and this is a quote, a fathomless sink of ignorance and superstition riddled with pre-literate mythology and mumbo-jumbo. There's a couple quotes combined. But, to dedicating 2 years of your life to actually doing intensive meditation practice. So what specific experiences have you had that have led you to be able to find the useful within what might appear to be a rubble?
Yeah, well, I did many things backwards. I mean, I think my sophomore year in college, I sort of rediscovered the 60s for myself. I mean, this would have been in 87, I think, 86, 87. I had an experience with the drug MDMA, which is not technically a psychedelic, but is often classed among the psychedelics. And it was just a truly formative experience for me. I mean, I had done some other drugs in high school. I had smoked marijuana. I'd even done mushrooms a couple of times, but never saw any implication for understanding the mind or much less leading a better life. I mean, those changes in my experience in my state of mind never suggested to me that it would be possible to develop any different traits of mind, and much less explore a path that would lead to anything like awakening or enlightenment. Or I just had an entirely secular upbringing. It wasn't an irreligious one. I mean, there was no criticism of religion in my household, but it was just God talk was irrelevant. It just never happened, and I had just no exposure to Eastern philosophy or Buddhism. Until I had that experience with MDMA and just started reading. I think that the first book I read was a book by Ram Dass. I think it was just a transcription of some talks he gave titled "The Only Dance There Is." And that, I mean, Ram Dass, as you might know, was a very eclectic teacher. I mean, he was a nominally a Hindu, and his guru Maharaji had been a Hindu. He had done the psychedelic research with Timothy Leary at Harvard and got defenestrated along with Tim Leary for having passed out LSD to all comers, including undergraduates. So he went to India, met Maharaji, and came back and started teaching. And so maybe about 6 months after that MDMA experience, I found that he was doing a retreat in Brighton Bush, Oregon for 10 days. And I had never meditated. I don't think I'd started a daily practice before going on that retreat. I don't think so. That was my introduction to meditation on that retreat. And he, being eclectic, he was teaching a kind of smorgasbord of spiritual practices. So there was Hindu stuff like devotional singing, a kirtan, and there was yoga. But there was also Vipassana meditation, very much in the style of it's just Mahasi Sayadaw, Vipassana is taught at IMS by teachers, now friends, like Joseph Goldstein. So that was my first introduction to formal meditation practice, and then it was natural for me to leave that retreat and seek out Vipassana retreats specifically. Thereafter, I actually dropped out of college. I was for two reasons. One, I thought I was just going to write fiction, and if you're writing fiction, nobody cares whether you finished college, and much less where you went. And I also just wanted to explore the esoterica of Eastern spirituality more deeply. So I was, and on that front, I was kind of rowing in two boats simultaneously. I was interested in the Hindu tradition, both the devotional one as expressed by someone like Ram Dass toward his Guru Maharaji, but also the Advaita tradition as expressed by in the books I was reading by people like Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, and those non-dual teachings struck me as interesting. But the formal practice of meditation I was getting at that point was Vipassana. So I sat retreats at IMS, and I don't think Spirit Rock was built yet. But I sat, but people like Jack Kornfield and other teachers who wound up founding Spirit Rock, they were teaching retreats in rented centers, like in the Mental Physics Center in Joshua Tree. There was every year there was a 10 or 20 day retreat there. And also up in Northern California. So I was sitting in a bunch of 10-day retreats, and eventually I sat 2-3 month retreats at IMS. When U Pandita Sayadaw came out to teach, he's the Burmese meditation student of Mahasi Sayadaw, and one of Joseph Goldstein's primary teachers. I sat with him in Australia for 2 months, and also I think 1 month at IMS. And then there was this development in the Vipassana community as taught in the West, both in the UK first, I think in the UK first with Christopher Titmus's community, but then also at IMS. There was this sort of a collision event with the spiritual career of Andrew Cohen. I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a student of Punjaji's, who was a student of Ramana Maharshi. So there's kind of an Advaita line there. And Andrew had been a student, I think primarily of Christopher Titmus's in Vipassana, but went to India and had his mind properly blown by his encounter with Punjaji, and came back kind of singing the song of Sure Heart's Release in very much in an Advaita tune, and very much explicitly denigrating Vipassana practice as dualistic and unnecessary and misleading, etc. Feel free to interrupt me if I'm going down a pathway that is not predicted. So this would have been I think he had his experience with Punjaji and came back and started teaching somewhere around 88 or 89, I think. But I didn't catch wind of this until maybe 1990, somewhere around there, 91. And it seemed, and I went to India. I had made many trips to India in this period, both India and Nepal. But I went to India to see Punjaji. I went and saw Andrew once, and I was actually quite unimpressed by him as a teacher. Just for a variety of reasons. And there's a much later conversation I've had with him on the Waking Up app, if anyone wants to hear that. This is kind of in the aftermath of his flame out as a guru. I mean, he's interesting now as a guru because he had a kind of a spectacular implosion in his spiritual community, which had all the signs of being a proper cult. But in the aftermath of this, he he issued some kind of mea culpa. Whether it was a full enough mea culpa or not, I can leave for others to judge. But he sort of admitted that he had gone off the rails and was not the fully enlightened person he had claimed to be, etc. So anyway, I finally had a conversation with him about that, some 20 years or more after first seeing him as a teacher, 30 years maybe. Anyway, back to 1990 or thereabouts, I went to India to meet Punjaji, who was Andrew's teacher and by all accounts an extraordinary person, and found that to be so, and found that his very uncompromising non-dual criticism of really all meditation practice, I found that to be very bracing and interesting and worth considering, but also still kind of too steep a path for me to actually walk, right? I mean, basically, Punjaji's rap was, and this won't be, it wasn't especially novel, but it was novel in his absolute commitment to cutting through anyone's dualistic illusions, right, including the illusions of practice, right? So you come to him thinking you're unenlightened and that you have a problem that you can solve through the practice of meditation, and he wouldn't support any of that, and he would basically the explicit and implicit message of everything he said was, listen, there's nothing you can do to free yourself, because yourself is what you're calling yourself is an illusion. Your very starting point is mistaken. Anything you add to this condition of mistakenness is just something, a tool you're picking up in a dream. It's not going to solve your problem. All you can do is wake up. And so you either understand what I'm saying to you right now, or it's hopeless, right? All you can do is sit here and kind of wait to have the epiphany that I'm trying to provoke in you through this conversation. But if you decide to go back and sit another retreat, or even sit cross-legged deliberately to try to concentrate on anything, all of that is just mistaken. I mean, this is just dream yoga by a dream character who is suffering a dream condition of unenlightenment. And once you wake up from this dream, you'll realize that everything I'm saying to you now is true, and everything else that you had imbibed from the spiritual shelves in the bookstore is just a one version or another of conceptual confusion. So even unlike his own teacher, I mean, Ramana Maharshi would at least give some kind of concession to gradualism by saying things like, you must make every effort to become effortless, right? I mean, there was a foothold you could get purchase on to start the project of looking inward and hopefully discover something. But with Punjaji, there was really nothing. So anyway, I had that experience with him, but it was coupled with an experience of really being bowled over by his personal charisma. I mean, he was really just a kind of a shockingly free, or apparently free and impressive master to meet, right? And I mean, part of this was accentuated by the fact that he spoke perfect English, so there was no burden of going through a translator. Your attention wasn't being diverted to talking to the translator and then hearing the master speak in gibberish and then having it come back through the translator, as I'd had with other great meditation masters. But anyway, I came away from Punjaji just really kind of not knowing how to practice, because enough of what he said in criticism of dualistic gradualism rang true for me. Like, again, I had sat, at least 3 months at this point with U Pandita Sayadaw and encountered the very striving and goal-oriented style of practice that he was, urging upon his students at that point. He would say things like, if you must practice absolutely continuous mindfulness, and the primary analogy here was rubbing two sticks together to get fire. And the moment you stop rubbing, the moment you lose continuity, they cool off, right? And it's as though all of your effort is wasted up to that point, right? Like, so you really need to get enough continuous momentum here and balance all the factors of enlightenment to break through to this experience of cessation. which is really the only thing that can uproot the defilements, and you really are suffering from these defilements right now. All you can really be mindful of in this moment is, in some sense, the evidence of your unenlightenment. And so my practice at that point was a kind of vigil, waiting for these auspicious changes to happen. Right? I was waiting for the lights to go out in the cessation experience. I mean, that said, I had extremely pleasant experience practicing with U Pandita. I mean, some people experience this harrowing beatdown of their ego and lots of frustration, but I was really just very joyful in my practice. I mean, certainly in the 2-month retreat that I sat with him in Australia, it was at least a month of what seemed like just pure equanimity and just if I could have just seized hold of that mental state and kept it for the rest of my life, that would have been good enough. It seemed. But still, my practice was very much confined to this logic of seeking to untie the knot of self and seeking to transcend what did seem like a self-confirming sense of confinement, even with all that equanimity and even just the effortlessness of practice at that point. It did seem like there was something to wait for. There was some change. There was something to accomplish. So anyway, Punjaji's criticism rang true, but again, I couldn't figure out what to do with it except to keep looking at the nature of my mind and trying to realize that what he was saying about the illusoriness of the self was true. And I couldn't quite do that. I would have these haphazard experiences of selflessness. I'd had them even before meeting Punjaji, just purely doing Vipassana practice. So the experience of anatta was not foreign to me, but it always seemed kind of, apart from brief moments of just experiencing, the kind of thing that is explicitly advertised in something like the, is it the Bahia Sutra? I mean, in the scene, just the scene, in the herd, just the herd. I had moments of that, but again, they seem to appear just by virtue of concentration, and the kind of the momentum built up on silent retreat, and they didn't seem coincident with ordinary waking consciousness off retreat. And also, all the talk about selflessness, I mean, perhaps this is something we can get into. All the talk about selflessness in a Vipassana context seemed usually derivative of the talk about impermanence, right? So it's kind of anatta by virtue of anicca, and that what seemed promised by Advaita and other explicitly non-dual traditions seemed different than that. So where I went after meeting Punjaji is I discovered the Dzogchen teachings within Tibetan Buddhism, and those are as you know, the explicitly non-dual teachings within the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And once I went to Nepal trying to meet Tulku Urgyen, who was kind of advertised as one of the greatest living Dzogchen masters at that point, but not knowing really how to get to see him, I wound up studying with one of his sons, who was kind of serving as a kind of gatekeeper to his retreat condition there. If you showed up at the front door of the monastery, you were told that Tulku Urgyen was perpetually on retreat, and you can study with one of his sons. I didn't know that there was a back door, but when I came back to the States after having gotten some Dzogchen teaching, but still not enough, I hatched a plan to create a trip with Joseph Goldstein and Sharon Salzberg and a few other friends who are Vipassana teachers who had become interested both in Punjaji just by seeing the crater that Andrew Cohen had left in the community. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I realize I've been talking for a half hour. And
This is fantastic. I mean, I've read and listened to Waking Up, but this is the most cohesive telling of this that I've ever heard. But I am curious if you would be able to mention anyone else who went on that trip. I've wondered for a while when you went back with Joseph and Sharon.
Yeah. So the trip was organized. it really came together because Suryadas had just come out of his 3-year retreats in France. So I don't know if you know him, otherwise known as Lama Suryadas. He was a student of Maharaji's, so had the sort of kind of also bridged the world of Hinduism and Indian spirituality with Buddhism. But then he fell in with I think he had done Goenka retreats as everyone did back in the day. So he knew of Vipassana practice in a Theravada context. But Suryadas had studied everything. I think he'd studied Zen as well. But he landed with Vajrayana Buddhism finally, and did these 3-year retreats in France under the guidance of Tulku Wangyal. But he knew all the great teachers of the age had come through those 3-year retreats, like Khyentse Rinpoche and Dujam Rinpoche, Karmapa, so when I just happened, I think Surya was just like staying at Joseph and Sharon's house when I showed up to complain about not getting to see Tulku Urgyen, and he said, "Oh well, yeah, I could have gotten you in to see Tulku Urgyen." So we just designed a trip based on that, that conversation, and he also wanted to see Punjaji. So the idea was to go see Punjaji in Lucknow for either a week or 10 days, and then to go see Tulku Urgyen for a week or 10 days. And so Surya really kind of quarterbacked this trip, at least the Nepal portion of it, which got us through the door got us up to see Tulku Urgyen at Naghi Gompa, where he was on retreat. Or got at least half retreat. I mean, he was still seeing students, but he was, officially not available. So also on that trip, there were a few other people, a couple of other friends of Surya's and Joseph and Sharon's, but I can't remember if there were any. I don't think there were any other Vipassana teachers. That came later. And once we had sort of broke the seal on Dzogchen for the Vipassana community, then other Vipassana teachers went to see Tulku Urgyen, but I wasn't on any of those trips with them. So it was really just a handful of us. I mean, maybe Danny Goleman and Tara Goleman also went on that trip, and they're old friends as well. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody, but and also. The scene at Punjaji's wasn't that crowded. I mean, when I went with the first time, I went with Ramdas, and there were just like the 5 of us who showed up were like the 5 people who were in the room with Punjaji. What happened a little bit later on was, I think either Osho died. I think he died around then, and his community discovered Punjaji. And so that at one point you would show up at Punjaji's house, and there'd be hundreds of people there, and they had to go find another place to meet. And then the scene just became a derivative of the chaos of Osho's world. And that was kind of the last time I saw Punjaji. Anyway, so it's a picture of some very seasoned Vipassana practitioners and teachers. Along with Suryadas, who had just spent, I think, close to 7 years on retreat in France, effectively studying to be a village lama, learning Tibetan and learning everything about being a Tibetan Buddhist. We show up to see Punjaji and take his teachings, and then we move to Nepal and got mind teachings from Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche. And that was the first time I felt I really knew how to practice. I came away from that trip recognizing what was missing in Punjaji's instruction and finding it present with Tulku Urgyen, and really kind of clarify, to use Dzogchen terminology, clarifying the view of Dzogchen. And thereafter, I came away feeling like I knew what to be mindful of for the first time. And this is you've probably heard me go around the track with Joseph Goldstein about this, harping on the difference as I see it between Dzogchen and Vipassana. and really kind of chewing on his skull for all that he did. I'm incredibly grateful for Joseph, and obviously I love Joseph. He's one of the dearest people in my life, but I do feel that I had been taught, both by him and really everyone else, certainly in the Vipassana community, to overlook this thing that Tulku Urgyen was pointing out, and which is really the basis of Dzogchen practice. And so that's the kind of the schismatic debate that I've been having with Joseph for now many decades. I do think it's possible to point this thing out quite a bit earlier than it's not that everyone can recognize it. I think mindfulness, ordinary mindfulness, is the greatest preliminary practice for recognizing it. But I do think it is a kind of preliminary, and that there's some concepts you want to have, and there are some concepts you don't want to have in order to recognize it. So anyway, I've been talking for what looks like a half hour, virtually uninterrupted. So consider me the worst interview subject you've ever had. I'll talk about anything you want.
Transfixed listening. That's what's going on this side. Yeah.
No, Sam, just your journey echoes. It's not a wasted narrative at all, because I think it echoes the great kind of fissure line between Western practice I see now, which roughly mimics the left and the right brain too, where you have, very logical, goal-oriented practice. The Burmese Pa'ok system is perhaps the most clear iteration of that, very structured, very precise, very left brain in a certain sense. And sort of focused on sort of a spotlight awareness is how Alice Gopnik, who's, a UCL or University of Berkeley professor, talks about kind of, I think, this sort of awareness. And then when that doesn't work for people, kind of, if it doesn't work, there seems to be this pendulum over to a very right brain approach, which is much more like what Alice Gopnik, I think, is classified as a lantern awareness, just very open, just, be here in the moment and just wake up from the dream, a very non-dual, or rather, immediate awakening practice. That might be an imperfect map, but why I find it relevant is because that you're right, that path leaves no room for effort either. And where do you get a toehold if you can't jump up that wall? You just hit the wall and run straight into it repeatedly. But for you, whatever Dzogchen offered actually did somehow bridge that gap. It gave you enough of a toehold. It let you stabilize that anatta perception. So, I'm curious for you, what was that? What's the punchline to that? Lead in, like what ended up doing the trick for you with Dzogchen, and how does that ripple out to how you teach others now?
Yeah, well, I can't do much better than offer some analogies, right, which are imperfect, but they are fairly evocative of the phase transition that is available for people. And it doesn't. My view of it doesn't really align with the way that the map you just gave so much, because there's another place on the map which I think I did hear you describe, which is not the same as what I consider non-dual mindfulness, which is a kind of attitude of non-striving, a kind of like what's often called choiceless awareness. That is, there's like an open, you're no longer engaging the spotlight of attention. You're just noticing whatever you notice. But for most people, there still is the feeling that there is a subject doing that noticing, however effortlessly, however choicelessly. There's still a me behind my face that is waiting for something to happen on some level, even though I know I shouldn't be waiting, even though I know I should just be truly kind of non-judgmentally accepting and of whatever's appearing on its own in the present. I will grant you that posture can be found in the mind, but it still feels like, for most people, that there's some subject adopting that posture, right? The posture of non-striving, the posture of choicelessness, etc. if in order to really practice non-dual mindfulness, you have to notice that there's no one practicing non-dual mindfulness, right? That there really is no center to experience. There's no place from which you could aim attention at any object of attention, right? So that subject-object perception breaks down, if only for a moment at a time. But that moment is the moment of mindfulness. Then the signature of mindfulness is the loss of a sense of self that could be mindful. And there are several analogies that kind of capture this for me, and how categorical a phase transition this is, and how the kind of the conceptual apparatus, having a conceptual apparatus or not, can really matter, right? So, one analogy I often use is the analogy to recognizing the optic blind spot, right? Which is something that most people have had pointed out to them in school, and then they really never think about it again unless they go into physiology of some kind. But most people will be familiar with this little experiment you can run where you can make two marks on a piece of paper and close one eye and stare at one mark, which is like a fixation cross, and then the mark that's outside. Yes, exactly. You move it closer and closer to your eye, and at a certain point, when staring, resolutely at one mark, the other mark will disappear. And what that reveals, what its disappearance reveals, is that there's a place in the retina that's not gathering any data. I mean, it's just the place where your optic nerve transits through the retina, and it's just so you really are blind again with one eye closed there and yet that the rift in your field of vision is undetectable. It just gets kind of filled in seemingly by the mind. But you can play with it. The crucial thing is that you can perform this experiment and resolve your doubts fully just by playing with it. I mean, if you fell into doubt about this, you can pull out the piece of paper again and you can move it back and forth, and it really the dot really does disappear, and there really is a hole in your field of view there, and it's with that level of, I mean, again, there's something to do. Here's how that analogy is useful. One is, if you don't have the right concepts and if you're not given the right experiment to perform, you're never going to see this thing, right? It's just invisible to you. And the other interesting piece is that it's not invisible by being too far away, right? This is not a fact about your subjectivity that is far away or deep within or requires some kind of heroic change in your mental capacities to glimpse. You really just need the right concepts and very, very brief methodology, and it's there right on the surface of experience to be noticed. It's the sort of right on the surface, the superficiality of it that is also analogous to where I would point the meditator in their attention to glimpse the illusoriness of the self. Another analogy I would give is, and this is one that is somewhat derogatory of ordinary Vipassana practice, but this is how I felt when I glimpsed this thing with Dzogchen instruction. This is the analogy, the kind of a twofold version of this analogy came to mind. This is how I viewed all my previous Vipassana practice. It's as though I had been led to a kind of a still mountain lake and told that I would, if I wanted to see my true face, I needed to only look in the surface of this lake to glimpse my true face. Just imagine living in a world without mirrors. And you're told there's a way to actually see what you look like, and you can come to this mountain lake and simply look. But in addition to being told that I had to I could see my face in this lake, I was told about all the preliminary things that needed to be seen in the lake, right? And all of these things are beneath the surface of the water, right? So I was told about the fish and the moss and the rocks and all of that, all of the kind of the metaphysics and the, so just by analogy, think about all that you learn about Buddhism when you start practicing Vipassana. You're told about the kilesas and the factors of enlightenment and all of the things that need to be balanced and uprooted, etc. And so it was very natural for me to go, just to rush up to the surface of this lake, and for my gaze, my plane of focus of my gaze, to plunge right through the reflection, the true reflection of my face, in beneath the surface of the water, and to see, to immediately alight upon all the things, all the diversity of things that are there to be seen beneath the water. So all the rapture and the restlessness and the everything there is to notice once you begin meditating. And yet the crucial and, in my view, kind of tragic thing, the tragic misapprehension there is, you really are from that first moment looking through your reflection, the reflection you're seeking to recognize of your true face. You're looking right through it and not seeing it, really not seeing it, but your eyes are really looking in the right direction. It's just that your plane of focus is off, right? You're seeing what's beneath the water. And the water is crystal clear, right? And there's a lot to see. And it's fascinating. And you can stay there for the rest of your life, in my view, diligently practicing in that way. And I had spent, at that point, at least a year on retreat practicing that way. And people will be familiar with this. If you're not familiar with it, if you don't have access to a lake, you can notice this by reference to a window, where it's possible to kind of use a window as a mirror. You can see your reflection in the window, but then if you change your plane of focus, you can look through the window and see what's on the other side of it. Whether you're looking at the world outside a building, or you're looking, from outside into the interior space of a building, and people can notice that just this shift in this plane of focus, right? And it doesn't take much. It's an incredibly subtle change in attention to shift from looking at the surface of a window and using it as a mirror, and looking through it and using it as a window. And the subtlety of that, and so virtually every part of every aspect of this part of the analogy does apply for me. I mean, it's when you ask yourself, like, what is required? How much work is required to go from looking through the window to recognizing your reflection in the window? It's very, very subtle. It's almost nothing at all has to change, right? Certainly, you don't have to move your eyes. You don't have to change where you're pointed. And yet everything, on some level, everything changes when you can suddenly see the mirror-like quality of the window versus just everything that's on the other side of the glass. So that, and it's also, it's true to say that the epiphany that's there to be had is also right on the surface, right? It's not deep within, right? The encouragement of depth is genuinely misleading in this case, right? So to say that, okay, no, you just need to get deeper and more subtle in your practice, notice I guess so by kind of mapping this onto kind of Mahasi style practice, as you're, in the depths of a retreat, you're practicing 12 to 18 hours a day and you're just developing continuity, to be told by a teacher, well, can you notice what happens just the moment before you reach for anything, right? Just can you notice the arising of an intention? Bring intention into the field of view of again, this is looking beneath the water look for some new species of fish, right? Or studying the world outside the window, in my view. Another analogy and this kind of cuts to what the pointing out instruction with Tulku Urgyen was like for me. I mean, just how kind of and this is not something that's so familiar in a Vipassana context, but is and may seem strange, but this is just how active the role of a teacher could be in changing the experience of a student. This is not technique-based. This is really just the quality of the information coming from the teacher. And this is also kind of an analogy to a mirror. And so some of your listeners may be familiar with this experience, but if not, I think it's easy enough to imagine. Many people have had the experience of coming into a room, maybe a public space, a restaurant, say, and not noticing that one of its walls is in fact a full-length mirror, just a floor-to-ceiling mirror. And so that you could spend the better part of a meal, say, in a restaurant, thinking that the restaurant is twice the size it actually is. Like there's a bunch of people over there eating lunch too, and yet at a certain point you recognize, oh no, that's just a mirror reflecting the room I'm in, and the room is actually just half the size it seemed, and all those people that I thought were people over there, those are just the people over here in the room being reflected, right? So this kind of this categorical shift in what a space is like. But you could imagine that epiphany being forced on you if you're beguiled by the kind of the perfect clarity of a mirror on one side of a room, and a teacher walks in and says, "Okay, this is everything all the beauty and ugliness you see over here, all these changes that you see are really just this condition of kind of luminous emptiness in a mirror, and you're just not recognizing it. You've kind of lost your purchase on your experience here. But I'm going to show you." And just imagine a teacher just kind of placing his or her hand directly on the mirror, just wrapping it with his knuckles and showing you that there's no depth to anything you're seeing in that regard. It's just like, this is a mirror, right? This is not the world. Right? So that phase shift is analogous to what I experienced in the pointing out instruction. Like, so I'm looking, I feel like I still feel like a meditator. I still feel like a subject. I kind of desperately looking to have this epiphany of non-duality. And what Tulku Urgyen was able to do was kind of help me kind of thread the needle of my attention at that moment and look for the looker in such a way where I could recognize its absence in a way that was truly clear, right? Like, it was not that my frustrated attempts to find it really just culminated in this recognition that there was nothing to find, right? And that the thing that was doing the looking was the thing that was being sought. And when you actually successfully look for what is looking, when you turn attention upon itself, when you look for the mind, when you look for the thinker, in addition to the flow of thought, there's a way of looking, again, which recognizes the surface, that the epiphany is right on the surface, right? Because again, what most people do is they struggle to go deep within. They struggle, and they move right past the point of epiphany, right? The epiphany is in the first instant of looking for what's looking. It's the initial gesture to turn about, right? It is, and it's in the beginning. It might actually be just the duration of a finger snap, right? You look, and in this first instant, like even when the snap of the finger is just still ringing in your ear, right? Where it's like it has the gesture can have the half-life of just this instantaneous cut in experience. In that first instant, you can recognize that there's no center to experience. There's no place from which to turn. There's no place from which to look. There's just this totality, this inexpressible totality that contains everything. It's not the totality of oneness. It's not like it's not like you've merged with the universe. It really is, and this is why I still make reference to Buddhist language more than any other, because the concept of emptiness does add something here, because it's not one thing. To call it one thing is not right, because everything in all its diversity still appears, but it's not many things either, because there's no mind that is dividing things with concepts at that point. There's just this kind of inexpressible openness in which everything is appearing. and it's of a piece with the cognizance that is knowing it. It is so to call it consciousness, as I often do, or non-dual awareness, as referenced in Dzogchen, seems right. What is being known is inseparable from the knowing of it. But the looking for it that precipitates this insight, again, it's right on the surface. If you think you're going to get there gradually, even by 2 steps, you've overshot the mark, right? Then you have to look again and find that this openness is freshly here, prior to concepts, prior to thought, and is the condition in which any concept or thought would appear. And so there's this, again, I was able to, with Tulku Urgyen, it's like he just kept, every time the mirror seemed to become the world again, he could just keep putting his hand on the glass, saying, no, this is the thing you're mistaken. Like this, it's at this plane of focus, you can recognize there's no one to recognize anything, right? And that's the recognition. I got back to the analogy of the blind spot. I was able to, it's like I finally got this piece of paper with the 2 dots on it, and I could move it back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I could do that to resolve my doubt about this. And that is what, one failure mode, which is worth understanding, and obviously the Dzogchen tradition is very aware of this, and in my view, quite paranoid about it. But some of this is understandable. I think some of it might be a little superstitious and unnecessary. But it is quite possible for someone to have this insight. To have this insight provoked by a conversation such as this, and to not see the point of it. Right, and to really just bounce off the whole project. And in Dzogchen terms, basically they're being given the most precious jewel imaginable, and they're just kind of chucking it away because they can't see that it's different from a piece of broken glass or something that has no value to them. Right, so there's a real fear in the Tibetan tradition around giving these non-dual teachings to the uninitiated, or the casting your pearls before swine, who don't know how to use these, don't even see the point of practicing any of this, because there really is the liability of someone actually making contact with genuine emptiness or genuine non-duality, and coming away just feeling like this is just a party trick, right? This is just like, well, what good is that? I still have my life to live, and I do think that this is possible. It's also very common for people to have no idea what I'm talking about here, and just to just be frustrated and to be wanting to recognize it and not recognize anything. That's also a failure mode, and that just kind of awaits more, mindfulness and more attention to this. But what happened to me was I had spent so much time trying to untie the knot of self, looking for this jewel in a bag of glass, and really and knowing its value, so that when it was actually handed to me, I knew exactly what it was good for. Right? It's like this is the antidote to all of the psychological suffering that I was having, including some of the elaborate and esoteric suffering that I was practicing in the name of spiritual progress. And so now I've taken you up to the moment of the pointing out instruction, but feel free to interrogate me about anything.
Yeah, actually, yeah. If you would be willing to, sometimes when you're, I've really appreciated. I've been listening to the Waking Up app for 4 or 5 years now, and specifically the teachings of yourself and of Richard Lang, who we interviewed, and Jayasara, and also of Locke Kelly, being very specific in the way that they are able to lead people's attentions. There's one guided meditation that you do, and I'm curious if you could do this one or any other one, maybe for 5 minutes or so. Be curious to hear you do it. Specifically, the one that I'm thinking of is bringing people's attentions to the back of the head and then going to the face and back and forth. But would love it, if you could do some guided meditation.
Sure.
Wrapping your hand on the mirror a little bit for us somehow.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess we can start with closed eyes because that's familiar to everybody and what most people want out of meditation. But you should notice that with your eyes closed, your visual field is still fully present, and you can gaze into the darkness behind your eyelids as though into an open sky. And it's really not altogether dark either. There's color and shadow and change in that plane. And then just be mindful in the ordinary way of noticing the sensation of your body resting in space. Notice sounds and anything else that comes to your attention, the feeling of breathing, wherever it's convenient to notice it. And just let your attention settle there in this open awareness of experience in all its channels. And there's nothing to do about thoughts. You don't have to block them or worry about them. Just notice that they're part of this field of appearances. And any energy, state of the mind, any mood or emotion, if you're feeling restless or bored or anxious or happy, any mental coloring to experience, notice that too as an appearance. And if you're like most people practicing dualistic mindfulness, there will be this sense, however gross or subtle, that there's a subject in the middle of all of this. There's a one who's paying attention. There's the kind of the spotlight of attention that can be aimed at sounds or sensations in the body. And that's something that is worth interrogating. That is ultimately an illusion that can be seen through. And the primary instruction really is just to look for that. Look for the sense that there's a thinker or a noticer or a one who can pay attention. But to sharpen that up a little, I suggest that we kind of creep up on it. And that the common feeling is to sense that it's behind your face, right? So just become aware of your face, the feeling that is reporting the existence of your face. Just notice that pattern of energy, tension or temperature, or movement. And the primary sense of subjectivity is to feel that you're this locus of consciousness, of awareness behind your face. It's almost like your face is a mask. You're just a position of knowing in the head. And if you're paying attention to the breath, say in the abdomen or in the chest, then the breath is down there. You're up here in the head behind your face. And when you're being mindful of breathing, you're aiming attention down at the breath. If you're aware of it at the tip of the nose, well then that's on your face and you're behind that, of aiming attention at those sensations, trying to get closer to the detail there, noticing the impermanence of change in sensation. So just be behind your face, if that's the way it feels. But now notice the sensation of the back of your head. Feel whatever you can feel of that. Tension or pressure. Feel that closely as you can. And now feel your face again, however it appears. And feel the back of your head. Now, many people will feel that they're kind of naturally falling as a subject. They're naturally falling experientially into this place that it's as though they're between their face and the back of their head, right? They're this kind of illuminated space of consciousness that is somehow behind the face and in front of the back of the head. Obviously, this is, in some sense, conceptually derivative of this idea that, perhaps perfectly accurate idea that consciousness is arising in the brain and the brain is in the head. But as a matter of experience, none of this is true, right? I mean, as a matter of experience, consciousness is not between your face and the back of your head. I mean, what you're calling your face, the sensation, the pattern of energy that you can notice, that is your experience of having a face, and what you're calling the back of your head, these are just patterns of energy arising in consciousness, in this prior condition of knowing. And it's not behind or in front of anything. Your consciousness is not behind your face. Consciousness is not in front of the back of your head. Anything you can notice is appearing in this open space of consciousness. Let's see if you can recognize that. Just notice that this experience of having a head is just an appearance in this prior condition that never conforms to it. It's not head-shaped. It's not behind anything. And everything that appears there. Sounds, thoughts. And this feeling of being a subject is also just an appearance of some kind. It's a wrinkle of energy. It's a reference to a sensation in the face or in the chest. But again, all of that is just an appearance in the mirror of awareness. So now, open your eyes and notice this sense that something has changed. The common experience will be to feel that you were having an interior experience a moment ago, but now you're aware of the world outside. But again, this is a kind of conceptual illusion. It's not that there is no world outside, but what you're seeing with your open eyes is just as much in consciousness as anything else you have been noticing. This is not outside. This is not outside of consciousness. What you're now seeing with your open eyes. This is the same place that the feeling of your face was appearing. It's the same place that your thoughts appear. This is all a vision. It's all mediated by the same condition of conscious awareness. As you gaze into your visual field, look at any apparent object. You might look at a computer or an object on your desk, or you can look at just the image of my face on the screen if you're watching this. And just very gently look for what's looking. As you're keeping this object in view, see if there's anything to see in your own direction where you presume yourself to be. Again, the natural starting point is to feel like you're behind your face, looking out across space at an object that is not what you are. So look toward your face. To put it in Douglas Harding's terms, look for your head. Look where you know your head to be. Isn't there just a world where your head is supposed to be as a matter of experience? Isn't there just this totality of light and color? See if you can notice what this relationship between subject and object is like in this first instant when you look for the subject. Just this, in the briefest instant of looking for the subject. What is that like to see anything? And it's in this place, this relationship between knowing and anything that is known. When you look for the knower, it's not like you ever successfully turn around and find the knower. It's that the gesture of attempting it, and again, this is just an initial instruction. This isn't how one continues to practice, but this gesture of making the attempt to turn attention upon itself can reveal this moment of failure where everything is of a piece. Everything is just in its own place. Everything is exactly as it is. There's just this inexpressible openness and vividness of appearance. And this is emptiness by another name. This is non-dual awareness. Right? To call it emptiness is to emphasize its sort of third-person kind of objective characteristics. To call it non-dual awareness is to emphasize the first-person experiential quality of it. But if you look for yourself, if you look for what's looking in this moment, coincident with paying attention to anything out in the world, you might notice the collapse of the subject-object. So in the scene, there is just the scene. There's not a seer and things seen. And it can be easier to do this with eyes open. And this is, I think, the reason why in the Dzogchen tradition, the instruction is given with eyes open, because we define our sense of subject-object so indelibly by reference to vision, much more than by reference to sound or sensations in the body. Though you can notice it there. Once you notice it with eyes open, you can notice it with eyes closed with reference to anything. But I do think it's easier with eyes open in the beginning. So anyway, that's now I'm just talking, but that's the instruction I would keep pointing people back to.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, some of our teachers in the Ajahn Chah tradition, Ajahn Chah himself and Lumpur Sumedho teach something similar. And It's interesting that on the Waking Up app, there are just so many different ways that people can realize that, it's not like you have to make the self not exist. It's not there from the beginning.